I know nature, going into the wilderness, like, and I'll just use Tammy as an example. She struggled at various points going up the mountain. She was like, what am I doing? What am I doing here? And, she doesn't want to go and hike another 26 miles up Kilimanjaro. I would actually like to go. And so this idea that you just mentioned, I think, is our finding our own vocation.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, the podcast where we celebrate aging with vibrance and we defy the stereotypes of what it means to age. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, a psychotherapist of more than 30 years, here to introduce you to my off-the-mainstream guests who will energize and inspire you. My hope is to create optimism about getting older and help you cultivate zest and joy in this season of your life. And I love to hear feedback from you, my listeners. Please drop me a line at zestfulaging@gmail.com. I read every single comment. And to find out more about this podcast, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. Well, it is such an honor to have today's guest on Zestful Aging. I met her a couple of weeks ago when she invited me to the screening of her first feature documentary, Three Extraordinary Women, held at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. The documentary tells the story of three women of color who were brought together through friendship and a desire to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Each woman experienced childhood trauma, abuse, and oppression, yet went on to find the path to their power. And they used the imposing mountain as both a metaphor for overcoming personal adversity and an opportunity to challenge insurmountable odds, like ending violence against women, undoing racism, and overcoming fear. Welcome to the show, Perletta.
Hi there, Nicole. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. It was such a beautiful experience going down to New York and seeing your screening. And we were just talking off mic about the response was so dramatic. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like, having the audience respond to your film like that?
Well, I have to tell you, every time the film is screened to the audience it's intended for, it is, I call it a holy instant, because it connects hearts. And so we received a standing ovation, and there were, I think, an exaltation of joy, of not just joy, but also pain. Like, the film tells the story of these three women who experienced adversity in their childhoods, but it also tells their resilience story and their post-traumatic growth story. And they tell it as, they're climbing up the mountain, and because we all have a personal Kilimanjaro. So I think it just resonates with people who, it resonates with women, it resonates with men, because there were some men who stood up and spoke to how the film felt for them, how they felt connected. And that was one of my goals. So I was over the moon.
It was a beautiful sight, I must say. And I don't know if you could see this, but I could as an audience member. People were tearful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I had the sense that, we kind of got kicked out of that auditorium space because it was late. I had a feeling that if they had let us go on, we would have been there for quite a while.
That is all. Actually, that's my desire. And so the film is not just a film. It is intended to help open up dialogue within the self, and then as a precursor for our having collective community conversation about like who we are at a deeper level, like the human journey. And so it does open up space for people, because Terry, Tammy, and I share some of our most vulnerable, heartfelt moments of struggle in our lives, not just as children, but as adults. We share the thing that happened, but what we made it mean. And one of the things that I say, because I believe it's true, is like in some ways we can live very much at the surface of life, right? Like these are the things I do, and this is who I do it with, and this is where I'm going. And yet, right, just under that is this richness of lived experience. And sometimes it's rooted in pain and loss and sorrow. And we don't necessarily share the fullness of those experiences with other people. And so the film invites others into this conversation about, like, who are you really? And how can we really be with one another in a deeper, more heartfelt way to witness each other's humanity and then ultimately to lead us to a different place.
Mm. Yeah, I was wondering about that because you also make that clear on your website. You're not saying, oh, I've had trauma, I've had a rough family. You really specify. And I was listening to and reading about you, and I thought it did seem insurmountable.
Yeah.
What did you, and I'm so curious, we talked a little bit off mic about resilience. How do you understand your ability to overcome these insurmountable traumas and be where you are today?
Wow, that is a very powerful question. So I'm just going to take you on a journey for a moment. I have a PhD in psychology and I focused on, my concentrations are in spirituality and consciousness. And so, and the program was a humanistic program. And I have to give that backdrop because it informs my perspective in life. Humanistic means the growth-oriented aspect of who we are. I'm fascinated with who we are as beings on the journey of life. And for me, that represents the lack of limitation on who we can become. And so I think we're pure potential. That's how I see everyone. And that's certainly how I see myself. And so when something happens, resilience relates to this ability to bounce back from adversity or stress and trauma. And certainly there's a resilient aspect of who we are that we can tap into when we are faced with challenging situations. But there's also post-traumatic growth. And they go hand in hand. And that describes when a person has the ability to have a significant trauma or adversity and they experience a greater, deeper sense of self and strength and capacity as a result of it, so that the experience transforms them. And I give the backdrop about my educational beginnings because I believe that we all have the capacity to experience something and then make it mean whatever we make it mean. And so often when something happens when we're not conscious, because 95% of things that, we're unconscious, right? We're operating on the subconscious level. We tell ourselves a negative story, like I'm not enough, or something's wrong with me, or
I deserved
it's my fault. Exactly. Yep. And that's one framing. But there's another framing, right? Which is, yes, this thing happened, but I actually get to define what I make it mean, which is the story we tell in the film. And I think that's why people are inspired because, Tammy, for example, experienced watching her mother be murdered by a stalker and then went to go live with a father who was abusive because he did not want to care for his 3 children. She was the youngest of 3 daughters. And she talked about her struggle of not feeling worthy because, for example, he would feed them different food, like the children got hot dogs and the father got steak. And so that she internalized not feeling like she was enough. And a part of the journey up the mountain was like for us to reflect, to really be present with these ideas that are self-limiting and then to reframe them. And so a part of the work that we're doing with the film in terms of educational and the workshops that we've developed is to become the conscious narrator of your story. So taking it out of the subconscious bringing it to our conscious awareness, even those self-limiting beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
reframing them, healing from those ideas that have us thinking that we're really not enough when we're really creating it all. We create the self-limiting story, and then we can create us and center ourselves as the hero of our own story. And a part of that is just back to the educational piece of it, because for me, this is rooted in helping to raise awareness. And it doesn't mean that things don't happen. Sadly, globally, things disproportionately happen. Challenging situations happen. Traumatic experiences occur for girls and women, boys too, but my passion is around girls and women. And it doesn't mean that those things don't happen, but where the personal power is sourced from within. And so the desire that I have, that I think speaks to so many people when they see this, is yes, I experienced these things. I once used to be ashamed of all of these things, by the way. Just speaking of my story, I was a high school dropout. I was raised in poverty. I was the victim of not just child abuse, but also witnessing my mother experience domestic violence. There was a lot of struggle in my own childhood experience and because of those things, I made some choices as a young girl to get married at 15. I had a baby by the time I was 16. She died of acute bronchial pneumonia when she was 4 months old. And so by the time I was 17 years old, I had experienced so much. I didn't even have the framework to know that was those multiple things were traumatic experiences. That was my normal life. And so part of my desire in really envisioning this film, it was to remove my own shame, like my healing journey, to tell my healing journey so that others would know that they're not alone. Because so often we feel like we're alone in our experiences, and people will see where you end up. Like now I'm a lawyer, I have a PhD, I do things in the world that really matter to me. And they don't know what happened in the beginning that made me this person that I am today. And I'll wrap up what I'm going to say by saying this, because it's one of the things I'm passionate about, because I think we're so overly focused on success so often, like, what does success look like? And the 10 ways to get to the success, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we oftentimes minimize, and I'll use myself for an example, the traumatic experiences that I had informed the lawyer I became. It was because of that, I wanted to be a lawyer. Because of witnessing my mother experience domestic violence, I wanted to advocate for women. And I'm not disconnected from that. And I think it's so easy to disconnect because we want to show the representative, because that
shiny parts.
Good. Yeah. And yet it was all of this richness of my pain and how I transformed it and how I struggled with it, because I struggled for about 25 years. I didn't want to talk about my daughter. It was so painful for me. And it was that healing journey of connecting with nature and actually pursuing my PhD and doing a lot of self-reflection and connecting in sisterhood, because women support women in beautiful ways, that I was able to heal and then look back and go, wow, we all have our own personal Kilimanjaro story. What if we culminated all of our rich experiences in a way that we could tell them to one another so that we could witness each other in a more deeply heartfelt way, and then stand in the gap for one another for the healing and transformation that needs to happen in the world. I think women in particular are uniquely able to birth a new way of being in the world and transforming these dialogues that we have that are incredibly unhealthy and superficial.
Wow. Hi, Zesties. Well, we all know that exercise is really important, especially as we age. Some say it's the most important thing you can do to stay healthy. But many of us find that it's really easy to start an exercise routine, but it's hard to keep it up. That's why we see so many exercise bikes and machines being used as clothes hangers come March. Am I the only one who has bought a gym membership that turned out to be a total waste of money? At this point in life, I want to do things that are good for me, but also fun. You'll never find me at a class called boot camp because life is hard enough. And that is why I love my rebounder. What is a rebounder? Well, it's a mini trampoline that has so many health benefits, it's kind of crazy. It turns out that gently jumping up and down provides excellent benefits to our whole body. It helps clear lymphatic drainage, which is basically toxic waste in our bodies. And get this, NASA uses it to help their astronauts reacclimate when they've been up in space. And I'm not even going to go into the improvements in complexion and mood. Let's just say it's hard to be in a bad mood when you're jumping to your favorite music. It's like your own dance party. But if you're interested in a rebounder, please take my advice. Don't buy a cheap one. They can actually be dangerous. I would recommend the one I have, which is a NEEDAK rebounder. It's NEEDAK, and mine's going on about 20 years old. I use it with light weights, and I've actually used it to train for the senior tennis games, as well as my Camino walk in Spain. And it's also great to use in upstate New York in the winter when the weather is awful, which is pretty often. So right now you can get a free rebounder cover at NEEDAK if you use the coupon code Zestful. So again, NEEDAK, NEEDAK. And if you have any questions, check out my YouTube demo. It's my most watched YouTube to date. So happy jumping, and I would love to hear how you like it. I'm wondering, one of the things I talked to your friend Tammy about after the screening was wondering about her thoughts about resilience and if there's any part of this you believe might be constitutional, meaning we're born with this. Because here's what I'm going to say. Perletta, as a kid or as you grew up, was able to access whatever strengths you needed to turn this into post-traumatic growth, to do the self-reflection, to do the work. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody has what it takes to say, I'm going to turn this pain, this into a transformation, right? They turn to addiction or, any other kind of self-soothing behavior. Do you have a sense of who you were as a younger woman in your 20s that allowed you to even think that you wanted to go into this humanistic PhD?
100%. I love this question. I was certainly a feisty little girl.
Aha! That's what I wanted to hear.
Feisty. I had my own mind, and I would say Tammy and Terry, like many of us do, and our voices are silenced, right? We're taught how to suppress our voices, and that was the dynamic that I was raised in. Yes, I was the youngest. I was a girl, and I had a role. And I looked at the dynamics, and I thought, this doesn't seem right. This isn't right. And so I do believe that, yes, there are predispositions that we each have genetically related to temperamental factors that I think predispose us related to resilience. However, it's also like this is the nature versus nurture. So there's a nature component, but there's also a nurture component because we do learn behaviors, we develop mindsets and coping strategies that can help enhance the resilience. And I'm going to give you a brief example since you want to use me. My brother, so I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. And growing up, what was affirmed in my household was like, we don't have anything and it's up to you. That's what our parents would say. Like Basically, you need to get an education. That was going to be the way out of poverty. And I believed that, right? So then that helped to develop the mindset I had about how I was going to change my life. My brother didn't. My brother is equally, if not more talented and smarter than me, but he became a blue collar worker. And I remember encouraging him when we were children, like, Lee, that's his name. Lee, you're an engineer. My brother can conceive of something in his mind and build it with his hands. I don't have the capacity to do that. He has a beautiful mind, but they didn't affirm him in that way. He was affirmed to work with his hands. And so he went into working with his hands. He became a millwright. And he didn't know who he was, in part because of how he was affirmed. And it's so interesting because we have the different but similar capacities. And so I think much of it is influenced by our learned behaviors and the mindset. And so if you have a growth mindset, right, then resilience can be nurtured. And if you speak into your own thoughts, like, well, that's not me. Well, who's defining the me? You're defining yourself, i.e. then creating the limitation. And we have conversations about that now because we're in our 50s. And he says, like, now he's become the man that he always was, when he was a child. And he's like, yeah, I ended up doing 12 years of education. Like, he continued to get education in his field, but he had a block that he wasn't smart. That's what he thought. And then that's how he lived until he became more aware. And so back to 95% or so of what occurs in the subconscious, those seeds were planted. So was it nature or nurture? Well, I think nature, he had it. I think nurturing impacted him to make him believe that he didn't really have all that it took. And that was just not the truth. One of the things we talk about in the film is how important, particularly as women, but for all of us, that we have to define ourselves, because the world will define us. And before we know it, we can begin to believe those subconscious messages that are programmed in us, that speak to a limitation of what we're not. When I think the soul yearns, the being in us, the essence in us yearns to fulfill our potential. Everyone.
It's so this is so interesting. Just this whole question of resilience, and belief, and how powerful it is when, I'm sure you've heard this idea of where do you turn the light on, right? Where do you shine the spotlight? Because there's so much negativity, and there's an author, Rick Hansen, who talks about the brain and how it's Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positivity. We're working against a negativity bias. So it takes effort and intention to say, no, that's not correct. I'm going to switch the frame.
Exactly. 100%. And what I believe for me is that there were seeds of inspiration and hope and belief that were planted deeply within my subconscious. So whenever things were happening in my life, I had this inner belief like, okay, I'm going to be okay. I just need to keep working at it. I need to keep going. And so my inner world was very rich in the sense that when things were happening outside of me, and there was limitations spoken to my life. My stepfather was emotionally abusive in addition to being physically abusive. He spoke the things I couldn't become. Like I had my little stethoscope bag when I was a child, and I was like, I want to be a doctor. And he would say, you can't be a doctor. And I asked why, and he said, well, because you're a girl. Girls are nurses. And when he said that, I was like, well, why do girls have to be nurses? Like, that didn't make sense to me. And what I learned to do as a coping mechanism was actually to not share my dreams and thoughts to other people, but I kept them within myself and I nurtured them. And one of the themes, so there's 6 themes in the film, and one of them is intuition. And I am very much interested in having a conversation about following our inner voice, like cultivating this deeper connection with ourselves. not the biased impacted self that is the programming self, but the deeper, richer self. Because I think it's I mentioned earlier the transformative aspect or of psychology, or the transcendental aspects. I believe that there's various aspects of the personality, and when we tap into cultivating intuition, it can allow us to go on this magical journey that's not limited by, the five senses in the world that we see out there. We're
Mm-hmm.
cultivating that from the world within us, and that's certainly one of the things that I think helped me.
And tell me practically what that looks like, Perletta. So intuition, and for those of the women in the world who are listening, what does that look like to listen in and tune into that true voice? How do you do that on a daily basis?
Oh, so I'm going to tell you a little bitty story. When I was a little girl, I watched Jacques Cousteau. And for those who might not know who Jacques Cousteau
Mm-hmm.
is, he's a French explorer. And in the 70s, he produced a documentary, which I saw. I was born in 1969. So I was about 10 years old when I saw this documentary. And it was of his visiting Antarctica. And I was so inspired of like the explorer in him. It activated some part of me where I saw myself as an explorer. Watching him expanded my mind. It opened my emotions, which left a lasting impression. Like I wanted to go to Antarctica, by the way. I did it about 40
Mm-hmm.
years later in 2018, which was monumental because this is the aspect of my intuition. There was a form of knowing that I experienced watching him. Like I was like, that was me. And I gave voice to it. Like, oh, I would love to do that. I
Mm-hmm.
allowed myself to dream, to imagine, and it sparked the use of my imagination. And so, intuition is often described as a form of knowing or understanding that doesn't necessarily rely on conscious reasoning or logic, right? And so I grew up in the projects in Youngstown, Ohio. I didn't go out of the confines of my community. So the
Mm-hmm.
fact that I was dreaming about Antarctica
Mm-hmm.
was like, girl, please, that's not going to, the world would say that's just not going to happen.
Right.
But yet there was something deep within me where I was like, actually, it's possible. Right. And so I wasn't relying on the conscious knowing of the world, like this dimension.
Right.
I was relying on something from within that was drawing me, that motivated me, that I felt, I'm going to say subconsciously, like that's meant for me. And I didn't know how, and I didn't know when.
It just clicked and
It
it
was a
propelled you
gut.
forward.
Absolutely. It was a gut feeling that I tuned into, that voice that said, I want to go to Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that connecting to that inner voice at a deeper level that speaks to us in subtle ways. I have been cultivating that relationship with myself really for the last 40 years. And that is the voice that told me that I should have told my story. Because by the way, my ego, the Perletta that I know was telling me like, your story is not significant. When I had this feeling, this instinct, this desire to tell my story, my personality said, yeah, no, like no one's going to find your story interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
so I am very much passionate about people tuning into their inner voice, which I call intuition, because I think it can connect us to a deeper wisdom and a deeper knowing of who we are. And it can show up in a lot of different ways. As I've been in my own journey of experiencing myself, it oftentimes will give me guidance that is beyond, like I said, not just going to Antarctica, but even in creating this film, the what it told me was to tell my story. It didn't say that I should produce a film. But then once I received, I'm going to say, the message around telling my story, certain things started happening in life. There was a synchronicity
Mm-hmm.
of people that I would talk who would ask me questions about my journey and tell me it was an inspiration. And I started paying attention. Like, this is so interesting. I'm hearing this over and over in these different ways. Maybe I should pay attention to that. And that's what happened. I started paying attention to my own thoughts and feelings about what I was being asked to do. And instead of saying no, I said yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And does this have a spiritual or divine aspect, or how do you understand this? Is this, some people might call this God? What do you have another way to think about it? You talk about intuition. What is this thing? What is this voice? Where does it come from?
Here's how I make meaning of it. And it's related to like the transcendental aspects of possibility that I think exists. So there's different ways of knowing, right? And I believe that there are different levels of awareness. I believe in a collective consciousness or an energy that permeates all of existence, you know, the essence that's in flowers and that's in humans and in animals. And in that underlying essence or energy that exists, that for me, that collective consciousness is a part of this realm of tapping in and engaging at this deeper level. So yes, there is for me, a spiritual aspect of it, because spiritual for me represents my own growth oriented aspect of coming to know myself more deeply, not the person I've created, because like, who is creating the person? Who is the person behind the thoughts? And so for me, that's the spiritual aspect. It's like, who is that person? What aspect of me was feeling this connection to Antarctica? And by the way, when I went and jumped in the Antarctic, because I wanted to feel what the water felt like, it was like, I felt like I had come home to another aspect of my own evolution, like this aspect of becoming. And I believe the intuition, that part of ourselves, when we tap into another way of understanding and experiencing ourselves in relationship to the world, that's that growth oriented piece of each one of us that we have, if we're interested. Like, not everybody is interested and not everybody will believe that. All I can speak to is like my own personal testimony. And as I've been giving voice to and following it, actually that's what I'm doing right now in life. So I've accomplished a number of things, and my personality loves to accomplish things. And now I'm in this question of, well, what if I set aside accomplishing things and I allowed myself to be in the flow of life? What would that be like? Like, how would that feel if I just used my talents in service and I allowed myself to be called into the next question of who I am and how can I experience life and experience it more abundantly? So for me, that represents a number of things: intuition, allowing myself to really be, to take on things that feel in alignment with myself, where I'm connected and I'm connected within myself, but then I'm also in connection with others, because that ties back to what I mentioned in terms of this, what we're referencing as this collective consciousness. And if I'm in that flow and trusting, because it does require another level of trust that all is going to be well, because I believe that we're ultimately alchemists. We're each creating our experience. And there's a way that we can engage in life where we feel like we're at the effect. And that's one level of awareness. But then how do we expand that level of awareness to actually co-create with this energy, and rather than feeling like we're at the effect of it?
And that makes me understand you more. And I know you're a world traveler. You've done a lot of spectacular things in nature, and I can see how that would go hand in hand. Experiencing those things, that beauty, that nature, that energy.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I'm very clear about my values, and I added beauty about 10 years ago, because I found that when I was in nature, I started having a desire to go into the wilderness. Well, I grew up in Youngstown in Ohio, in the in the Briar Hill projects. Like, why do I want to go into the wilderness? Like, what part of me wants to do that?
How'd you get there? Yeah.
And I again, it's back to cultivating this relationship. As I tuned into my intuition and started quieting the noise of everyday thoughts and really allowed myself to be present, it was like a yearning. And I just started listening to what really spoke to my heart and the essence of myself. And I found peace there. I found tranquility there. I
Mhm.
found deeper connection with myself there. And so, like, I don't know why I had a yearning to go into the wilderness, but I did, and I listened, and I found healing there. And so, a part of the passion that I have around hiking and exploring the world, it's like exploring the world, exploring the self. They're interchangeable, and I give myself tasks. I call them warrior tasks every year to really allow myself to step out of the regimented life to explore myself.
Mhm.
And going into nature has, and not just nature, but traveling in general is, presents us, I think, with innumerable opportunities to discover who we are. Because particularly if you're a solo traveler, I had to get past being
Mhm.
afraid as a woman, being afraid as a woman of color. How would people look at me? Like, I can't have any friends that travel with me. I'm going to be bored. There were tons of things I had to get past in order to actually go on these journeys. Some of them alone, some actually I lead journeys with women. And I, hang out with friends and my daughters. But when I go alone, I'm going for the specific purpose of connecting with me more deeply, to
Mm.
hear my authentic voice more and more, to give life to it, because so often that voice is encouraging me to do something that I feel I don't have the capacity to do.
Hey, hey, Zesties. Well, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one feeling tense and anxious these days. Every day, it seems like there's more scary news. Well, I've been a psychotherapist for over 34 years, and I've learned a lot of techniques to help manage anxiety, and I've been using them. But recently, I found something new that I wanted to tell you about. I actually just stumbled upon it at an event for veterans. It's a little breathing device called Calm Ego. And when you're breathing in a way that promotes relaxation, which is basically long exhales, it lights up. And you can add a calming scent if you like. So Calm Ego is a natural, portable, drug-free solution that can be used in moments of upset, anxiety, and stress. And it's effective and pretty unique. And you can use it for both immediate relief and also long-term effectiveness. So I love that you don't have to think about the breathing. You don't have to count. You don't have to imagine a square. You really don't have to do anything. It does all the work for you. I find it to be especially helpful before bedtime, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I'm partnering with Comigo to offer you a 25% discount if you use the coupon code Zestful at when you're cashing out on the site, which is Calm Ego, CALMIGO.com. And please let me know about your experience. I will be interested to hear. Thanks. Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking about things that I have learned traveling that I didn't expect. That you're put in situations, and
Hmm.
I walked part of the Camino last year with my friends, and everybody was saying, "Oh, it's life changing. It's great." For me, it was really. Now, I just did a very short um, section of it, but it was a slog. It was way too long
Hmm.
mileage for me to really
Hmm.
enjoy it,
Hmm.
and got just a better clarity of, I wish I was this person, but I'm more like this person. I love doing a hike, but I don't want to hike 19 miles every day. That's just not, it doesn't feel good. It's not for me. And to be okay with, like, other people think it's great. Other people are excited about it and proud about it, but that's not for me.
Absolutely. So one of the beauties, I think, of being alive is we get to explore our greatest imaginings. And what you're going to explore is going to be different for what I'm going to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. And so I know nature, going into the wilderness, like, and I'll just use Tammy as an example. She struggled at various points
Uh-huh.
going up the mountain. She was like, what am I doing?
Yes, he was. And that was
What am I
really,
doing
the
here?
honesty was really quite beautiful to see.
And she doesn't want to go and hike another 25 mountain, or I'm sorry, 26. She doesn't want to go and hike another 26 miles up Kilimanjaro. I would actually like to go. And so
Mm-hmm.
this idea that you just mentioned, I think, is our finding our own vocation. And there's a book called The Farther Reaches of Human Nature by Abraham Maslow, which I love, because a part
Mm-hmm.
of what he talks about is um, that we each have an ability to explore our own human potential and the higher aspects of our existence. And
Mm-hmm.
because I believe we're individuated aspects of that creation, right? That we're creating all the time, you get to create something different. Like, create what fires you up. That's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to play with one another, And so you'll go on a hike. You're like, no, not 19 miles per letter. But then
Yeah.
I get to be invited into things that you love.
That's right. That's right. And
Mhm.
you know it. It's not an intellectual process. It's not like, well, this is building up these muscles and I'm having, it's not that. It's just like, yep, feels like I'm home. Feels
Yep.
good. Feels right. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, Pauletta, I feel like we could talk for hours. Your wisdom is just like, oh my gosh, you're blowing my mind. And I'm really hoping that, we can continue to collaborate. I'd love to hear more of your story. And I wanted to share your website and the film with our listeners so they can find you. Can you let people know where they can hear more?
Sure. The website is 3extraordinarywomen.com. So the word three, the word extraordinary, the word women.com. And there's information about how to host a screening in the community for those who might be interested in that, or just to reach out. That'd be great.
Mm-hmm. And you have your own website you have your own offerings in terms of helping people follow their intuition and assign themselves warrior tasks. Do you want to give them that information?
Oh, sure. Thank you. My website is Perlette Ramos. So Perlette is PEARLETTE, Ramos, RAMOS.com.
And the photos on that it's just such a beautiful website. I don't know who you had do it, but it is spectacular. So it has been such a pleasure and an honor. And I feel so fortunate to have crossed paths with you and got to see you in action at the UN, and hoping to see more of you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
This has been delightful, Nicole. The time passed by really quickly. It's been a pleasure. You're a delightful woman.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends.
Our theme song is All I Did Was Wait for You by Kjartan Abel. Visit Kjartan-Abel, that's KJARTAN-Abel, ABEL.com to hear more of Kjartan's work. And our technical director is Stephen Litweiler.
And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest. See you then.